Hello, and welcome to ManUp's presentation and discussion about gender-based violence. Today, we're going to talk about what it is, why it matters, and discuss how men can be a part of the solution. In between slides, we'll also be discussing some commonly asked questions that we receive on the topic. Before we begin, I just wanted to inform everyone that today's conversation is going to include serious topics such as sexual assault and sexual harassment, and that there is no shame in stepping away from the presentation if you feel the need to. With that being said, hello, my name is William Murphy, and I joined up because I'm fortunate enough for people I know in my life to have opened up to me about their experiences with gender-based violence. And now that I'm aware of how frequent and how serious it is, I want to do what I can to help prevent it from happening to other people.
Hello, my name is Darren. I decided to join ManUp after one of my professors had informed me about this program. And when she was describing what this program was all about, it was something that immediately caught my interest. I've witnessed such examples take place, whether it be through sports and just throughout different areas of growing up. And I knew that something needs to be done in this, and I want to be part of the change.
And hey guys, my name is Nicholas Bartley, and I think the main reason that I joined ManUp was for my sisters. So I'm the youngest sibling with 4 sisters, and so I grew up seeing their struggles, and it really made me want to help women all throughout our country and all around the world.
So the story of ManUp really begins with the story of Rtea Ann Parton. Rtea was a normal, happy 15-year-old girl out in Nova Scotia until one terrible day in the fall of 2011. She went to a friend's house for a house party, and while there she got drunk, blackout drunk. And while she was barely conscious and in her stupor, 4 boys carried her into a room and proceeded to take turns sexually assaulting Rtea. They even took pictures of each other sexually assaulting her. She woke up the next day barely remembering what had happened, but remembering feeling alone, cold, and that something was very, very wrong. Her victimization, however, did not end there. At school, those pictures that those boys had taken that night had been shared with everyone. She was called a slut by classmates and was cruelly harassed, both in person and online, by classmates and even her friends. Their words, they hurt more than they ever could have imagined. She eventually ended up taking her own life in 2013 because of the abuse and trauma that she suffered. To be clear, no amount of alcohol she drank, nothing she wore, or anything else about that night justifies what happened to her. Her being at that party does not justify what happened to her. What happened was a crime and was unequivocally wrong. And as for those 4 boys, they faced 0 legal charges or legal repercussions from that night. Despite the photo evidence, this case was dismissed. This is a textbook case of how sexual assault is treated in our society. And I understand that talking about this might make many of us uncomfortable. In fact, it probably should. But in order to move forward towards a better tomorrow, we need to understand the realities of today. A spark of light from this tragedy was that it inspired her parents to speak up about gender-based violence, including her father, Glenn Canning. One day, he was speaking to some high school students in Ottawa, and those teens decided to start an organization known as ManUp, to fight gender-based violence and the toxic masculinity that enables it, to stand up, to be leaders, and to man up and help in the fight against gender-based violence. And we try to carry that legacy on today. Our motto, or rather our mission, is that we're young men striving to be leaders and working towards positive social change within our communities. We do this by trying to inform and empower other young men to do the same. To the men listening, the presentation is not an attack on you. It's not one that's against men. I'm a man, and I'm proud to be one. Instead, in each of you, I see someone who can be a potential ally. In each of you, I see someone who we at ManUp can help make positive social change in your own lives. The fight against gender-based violence is one that we all must fight together. And as the slogan says, we're not asking anyone to be perfect. There will be times when you fail to find the courage to tell your friends that his catcalling is inappropriate, or that it is wrong for your friend to assume that the sexual assaults that he heard of on TV is just the victim seeking attention. It's not always easy, but we're asking everyone to be better, stand up, to man up, and to do not what is easy, but what is right.
Yes, so one of the questions that we get a lot about our program is wondering why we call ourselves Man Up. And some people seem to think that it's perpetuating that same toxicity that we're trying to fight.
And I can see why they say that, but we want to change the term man up. Man up has been used for ages to put men down as a way to target our insecurities as guys and to make us feel like less of a man in order to get us to conform to some possibly toxic standards of masculinity. Think about the guys in a hockey locker room. One of the guys is sharing pictures of his girlfriend, sharing it to all of his buddies, which he did not get her permission to do. Those were for his eyes only. And what do you think that one person who feels that that's wrong and that what he's doing is not okay, if he tries to stand up, what is he going to hear? He's going to hear insults like man up, along with names like don't be a pussy, don't be beta, and they will find ways to make that guy feel bad for speaking up and tell him that he's the one making a big deal out of it. Man up is often used to maintain those toxic norms, and we want to change that.
Yeah, so we're really trying to change the toxic use behind Man Up. So instead of saying man up in a negative light, we're trying to switch that term in a more of a way that empowers men to create social change and to actually stand up for what is right.
Yeah, so to put the question and the answer, basically, we're just trying to redefine the word and redefine what it means to be a man.
I'm going to say better myself.
So our purpose and our reason. Well, we all know that without a doubt, gender-based violence exists everywhere. And we believe that it needs to be brought to the forefront of social innovation and change. This is not the way women are supposed to be treated. And so we need to do more to make women feel safe, feel equal, and know that regardless of gender, we can all share values. So here we can see some stats regarding gender-based violence. Around the world, at least 1/3 of all women will experience some form of sexual violence. 39% of all Canadian women have reported at least one experience of sexual assault. And it is estimated that between 15 to 25% of all North American college and university age women will experience some form of sexual assault during their studies, most of which will not be reported. But only as much as 2% of any rape claims have ever been found to be false. And these issues and stats are not bound just to young women and those in college. Throughout the current COVID-19 pandemic, women around the world have been faced with increased sexual and gender-based violence. In the last 12 months alone, at least 243 million women around the world have been subjected to violence in their own homes by an intimate partner. So what is our purpose and our reason for running Man Up? Well, each of us were once told the stats or shown graphs, but I think we've also seen the harsh realities of our current social norms and realized the importance of gender equality, as well as peace, justice, and strong institutions.
And to build upon what Nick's saying here, when we do present and share these statistics, a common question that we do get asked is, well, what about men's sexual assault stats? And what about the crimes that men face?
Yeah, that's a good question. And we still see gender-based violence on men as a serious problem. However, it is a gendered issue, and it disproportionately affects women. You can see that there's an 85 to 87% higher victimization rate in women versus in men. And regardless, each case, the perpetrator is most likely to be a man. So our approach in spreading knowledge and awareness is primarily geared towards men.
And to build on what you said there, Nick, you do want to recognize that there are issues that men face as well. Men are likely, men face issues with sexual assaults within the prison systems, and men are more likely to face, regular assaults as opposed to women. However, this is an issue that there is a definite need for men to take part of, and this is the one that we have chosen in order to help eliminate and help prevent. Now, another thing that we always get asked is about, well, I thought most of these cases weren't reported. What's that all about?
Yeah, actually, most cases of sexual or gender-based violence are not reported. And around 83% of cases were never reported. So we are kind of lucky enough in Canada to have other resources, but it really is a small portion of what is actually happening.
Yeah. And to be clear, a lot of those unreported cases that we end up knowing about is through the General Social Survey done by StatsCan, which allows people to anonymously, say that they have been faced with gender-based violence, and it allows us to get a more holistic view about the gender-based violence that isn't reported to police.
All right, so currently only 1 in 3 Canadians actually understand what sexual consent means. And so that leads to many gender-based violence perpetrators who don't consider themselves perpetrators. And that's part of the reason why young men with sufficient knowledge of effective consent are half as likely to perpetrate sexual violence. And the stereotype that sexual assault is only committed by strangers while walking through an alley is really grossly inaccurate. Actually, in most cases, the victims do know the perpetrator. And in Canada, as many as 80% of sexual assault cases that were reported involved someone the victim already knew. So what does consent look like? Well, the most important lesson is that there is no exact answer for every situation, but it could be as simple as asking, are you comfortable with whatever it may be? If the answer is no, then obviously you can't continue. And it's also important to remember that consent can be withdrawn at any time. So if the answer was yes, or you were believed that it was consent, it could definitely change. So you have to realize that and you have to stop. Also, not receiving an answer or feeling like you're getting mixed signals certainly does not mean that there's any consent there. Gut feelings or judging a situation by someone's actions.
Now, here's a question actually on the topic.
Sorry about that. Well,
no worries.
But on consent, yeah, so gut feelings and reading someone's actions can lead to a lot of miscommunication. The best way to get consent is receiving a clear and informed answer and making sure that it remains so throughout the time together.
So here's a question that we often get a lot about consent. Can someone give consent when they're drunk?
Yes, so unfortunately, Canadian legislation isn't always the most clear. And for many people, getting drunk and hooking up seems like a very typical thing, especially in the college communities. However, this is a very thin line to walk. In all cases, it is better to avoid sexual activities or advances while either person has been drinking. You'll never know how intoxicated someone is, so really there can't be that clear, informed consent if alcohol or drugs of any type are involved.
So yeah, and to be clear, one of the big things about consent is that it has to be informed and that the person at the time not only gives a yes, but also understands the meaning of yes and the repercussions of that. And under Canadian law and in reality, when someone is drunk, they're not fully able to understand the circumstances and they're not therefore actually able to give informed consent. And to be clear, none of us here are lawyers. We're all just students and advocates. However, it's, as you said, Nick, it's a very gray area, which is why we at ManUp just tend to say that avoid hooking up that night. Say you're at the club or you're at a party and you meet a really cute girl and you hit it off, but she's clearly drunk and she's not in control of herself. Maybe just get her number and just meet up with her another day. In those circumstances, avoid anything that night.
Yeah, that's a great point. And another thing we commonly get that's definitely really important to bring up is, what if someone was providing consent online, but when you go to meet them in person, they seem less interested? Is consent still there?
Yeah, so kind of like we touched on how consent must be clear, informed, and must remain so throughout. So consent through social media could imply that they will consent when you meet up in person, but it definitely doesn't guarantee it. If consent was truly expressed when you were on Snapchat, it still needs to be clearly expressed in person. And also, consent can be withdrawn at any time. So no matter what, you need to make sure you get that clear, informed consent beforehand and during.
Yeah, definitely. And just even communicating online in general, whether that be through social media, it presents a whole different component to just understanding gender-based violence and harassment and how it takes place, especially when it does come to consent. So, technology, communicating online is such a big part of our lives today. We all know how you should act online, but just the whole idea of how gender-based violence and harassment takes place online is still really new to us and much different than how it is in person. So that leads us to social media and online abuse. So as we've seen over the years, social media especially has become a really powerful outlet for attacking victims or experienced gender-based violence. And a common term and what we see is victim blaming. So after the fact, people will actually blame the victim for what had happened, would be harassing them, providing threats, and even doxing, which is actually seeking someone's personal information, using that information, dispersing it to the public, or using it against them in a negative way. So it's definitely been a big challenge too, just understanding how it takes place online. And it's definitely important because it's only ever going to grow if we don't do something about it.
So yeah, speaking about doing something about it, you know, as part of, standing up, what can one do when you're to intervene online when you see sexual harassment happening online?
Yeah, that's definitely a great question, Will. Like I was saying, gender-based violence or harassment taking place online is much different than it is in person. When it's online, you're not able to get the gauge of how serious something is. To what extent is the victim being affected by what is happening? I mean, you can't actually witness and get a feel for some of the most human elements, whether that be expressed emotion, nonverbal characteristics of someone, and just being face to face through those interactions. So the best thing and what we tell people to do when you do come across this online is to simply reach out to the victim, message them, ask them if they're doing okay. Let them know that you saw what happened, and just be there to support them. Just showing that you're there to support someone can really go a long way. So that's what we encourage everyone to be doing when it comes to online gender-based violence or harassment. And when it comes to being in person, this is what you should be doing. We should not be letting instances of gender-based violence or harassment go on. It is important to intervene. We understand it can be very difficult to do so. However, we need to be doing it. And what we do encourage you to do, if you do come across it, approach a person in a way that's less likely to create any sort of hostile response. We don't want to be putting people in any sort of situation that could cause, additional harm or put a safety risk to any of the people involved. And if you do see something happen, offer the support to the victim. Be there by their sides to get the help if they do need it. If they do need to contact, let's say, the police, or they would just like some resources there to assist them, be them and help them get the support that they do need to deal with the situation.
Yeah, and here's another question that some people ask. How would you stand up against someone who's in a group, or how do you stand up to a group of people?
Hmm.
Yeah, so that's a really good question, and we receive that quite frequently because standing up to a group of people is much different. You have to assess the situation. Like I said, the safety of everyone involved is a key priority. However, let's say if you're in a group, it's definitely very hard to go against, let's say, what your friends are saying. But it could be as simple as be like, hey, I heard what you said there. I know that you're better than that. I didn't think that was the most appropriate thing, right? We're not trying to put people down in this situation. We want to get the situation resolved, and, you know, let people know that what they're doing, you know, is not correct, but doing it in a way that's not going to cause any sort of issues between you and the perpetrator or the person doing it at the time.
Yeah, and to be clear, we don't want anyone getting hurt from this. Ultimately, if it's becoming that serious, where there's a threat of, you know, physical violence against you or another person, you know, there's always the police, and we don't want you to do anything that might endanger yourself. And it's also important to remember that, you know, if you're with a group of your peers, like you're with a group of friends at a party, it can be extremely difficult to stand up to the group of them. Say one of your guys says something inappropriate or makes a comment about someone else there, about a girl there that's inappropriate, and everyone laughs along, goes with it. You know, it can be difficult to know what to do. Ultimately, if you're feeling confrontational or angry or upset in that moment, sometimes the right thing to do is to just step away from that. And when you see the person who made that comment in a couple of minutes, say you're both grabbing drinks, that might be a better time to approach them and just tell them that they're better than that, and that maybe that wasn't the right thing to do. And again, with friends and family, sometimes just speaking privately might sometimes be better.
Yeah.
So this slide right here is usually what we do at the end of our presentations in person to help underline why it's important for men to play a part in fighting against gender-based violence. Because while men rarely, if ever, think about the topic, women have been forced to continuously, both consciously and subconsciously, alter their lives in order to avoid gender-based violence. So I'll bring the question to the three of us here. What do we do in our everyday life in order to prevent ourselves from being sexually assaulted or sexually harassed?
Yeah, for myself, you know, honestly say I don't think about it, and as a man, it doesn't cross my mind.
Yeah, I'm very similar in that sense. It's not something that really crosses my mind. I do things that wouldn't put me in vulnerable positions in terms of just general safety, but in terms of, you know, trying to prevent any sort of situation that would put me in a place where I'm experiencing gender-based violence or harassment, you know, stuff like that doesn't cross my mind.
Yeah, doesn't really cross our minds all that much. Now, you know, we've talked to other people about this and heard what women say. What are some of the things that we hear them say all the time?
Yeah, so some things that we've heard from women who follow the program and listen in is that they've had to change their gyms to avoid certain employees or avoid certain gym goers who have harassed them or otherwise made them uncomfortable. And then, kind of on the same topic, they've had to avoid busy times at the gym and at other places because they know that having that extra people around could cause issues.
Yeah, and to even build upon that, I've heard that there's almost like a no stranger is safe type strategy that is used. Where an example of that could be if you're waiting for an elevator and you know, the elevator opens and it's just a group of men. You know, sometimes some people do not feel comfortable with doing that just because they don't know them, so they do avoid that situation. In addition to that, if you're out in public and someone needs to go to the washroom,
Mhm.
what we've been told is sometimes they'll just bring their friend there just to accompany them to the washroom.
Yeah, and you know, it goes on forever. Never go to a bar or a club or a party alone. You always bring friends with you for safety. You never leave your drinks unattended. There's nail polish that exists that if you stir it in your drink, it's going to change the color of that drink. And you might do that if someone approaches you and you want to let the bartender know that this guy is a creep. They're kind of harassing you and they're making you uncomfortable. You're avoiding public transit sometimes. You're taking self-defense classes. And it just goes on and on and on. There's countless things that women have to do. And at the end of the day, that's not the answer to stopping gender-based violence. Instead, it falls on us to educate ourselves and each other on gender-based violence and consent so that we can play a bigger part in helping prevent it, and that we can have the courage and confidence to speak up when we see something wrong.
Yeah, and if we could leave you with one thing today, that is we need your help to be a part of this solution. We understand that standing up is never easy, but by you doing so, you're providing an opportunity to help someone. So in all doing this, you're just going to be helping make the world a better place in the end.
Yeah. So thank you, everyone. That's going to be it for today. If you want to reach out to us, you can email us at man.up.ontario@outlook.com, or you can always follow us and find us on Facebook and Instagram at ManUpOntario. So take care.
Perfect.
Bye, guys.
Thank you guys for listening.